Well, this time for Cravon Studios Shop Talk, I want to talk a little bit about action or movement programming as a mechanism. This is a kind of an interesting mechanism, especially if you want to invest in some thought and process and then let chaos ensue. I think it's one of those things that's been very fun, and you've probably used it in things like Robo Rally. You've played it there. But the crux or the core of an action or movement programming game or mechanism is that you choose your movements or choose your actions, usually in secret, and you choose all of them for the turn prior to executing them. Everyone will get their chance to choose their actions or movements. They're locked in. You commit to doing that. And then in the next phase, everyone reveals what they chose, and those are all executed with no further intervention. This can make some famously chaotic situations. It can be hilarious. It could be disastrous, but it can also be very rewarding. Right? So if you think about the way this works, writing things out and committing to that before you do any of it, and then letting nature take its course, that's pretty interesting. It's very much programming. Think about ancient computer programming when we used to use punch cards. You had to write it all out and commit to it, and then let the system run it. Basically, you feed the system a series of inputs, let the system run your inputs, and hope that you get the outcome that you were after. Punch cards, this was very difficult because you were pretty sure they were going to work, but you weren't sure until the system finished running and you got the answer or it crashed. Modern computer programs are the same way. They tend to be a little more interactive, and if something goes wrong, you can write the code so that it pops up and says, hey, something's out of whack here. Maybe you can fix it. So you can have some intervention, but usually you're going to give it some inputs and hope it runs its program, runs its code, and then completes what you want it to do. And that's always been a very challenging aspect. It requires a lot of forethought. One of the things that can happen is analysis paralysis. We'll talk about that in a minute. Some examples of this. One of my favorites was actually a toy. And there's an image of the toy here. It's called the Big Track. I had one of these when I was a kid. It came out in 1979 from Milton Bradley. And if you look at the back of it, there's a control panel, a keypad. And you would program in all of the moves you wanted it to do, like go forward 2, and 2 meant 2 units, which is 2 lengths of the toy itself. Go forward 2, turn right 90 degrees, fire the cannon 3 times, turn left 90 degrees, continue forward. And you could execute a certain number or program a certain number of commands and push the button and it would execute it, kind of like this video shows. And I borrowed this video from that gentleman there, from Mike Locke, who has it on YouTube. But if you think about that kind of programming, you pretty much committed, right? You've committed to what you're going to do. Programming games are like that, and programming games they're pretty cool in a lot of respects. So I mentioned Robo Rally earlier, and that was Robo Rally, where you basically program your robotic elements. They move along the track. They might end up on the travelators and get slid back and forth. And if somebody else happens to cross your path when you didn't expect them to, you can end up being pushed into a pit or be shot while you're trying to collect the flags. The other huge aspect of all this programming is that, like a computer program, you can program it, and it's pretty much acting on its own accord. But in games like this, you have to take into account what the other players may or may not be doing. And in Robo Rally, you are trying to push people off or onto a travelator or into a pit. But you're also trying to get the flags. So sometimes you may accidentally clash with other people. In other games, though, like Star Wars X-Wing, for example, it's a programming game, and the movement of your units, your X-Wings, your TIE Fighters, your B-Wings, you pre-program that movement. And as it happens, you pre-program it on a dial like this. Right? This happens to be one from a B-Wing. And you can see in the top there that it's moving 1 and doing a gradual turn. Well, you pre-program your move in secret, you set it down, and then everybody reveals their movement in initiative order, and you execute the move that you've committed to. Well, you're trying to anticipate where the opponent's going to have their ships for you to shoot. So you're trying to anticipate their moves, fly your ships into a position to be able to shoot your opponent, and then hope for the best. So it does take some thought about figuring out your opponent, especially in programming games that are head-to-head, like X-Wing is. Other programming games are like Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven was a pretty good one, a very, very famous one, I think. Now, I mean, still, some of the hotness going on. But with Gloomhaven, you're basically programming your moves or your attacks versus the game. And you'll get to use cards like these. These happen to be cards from the Scoundrel. I don't think I'm really giving anything away here. So these cards from the Scoundrel, you can see that you can either do something like a move if you just want to move, or you can choose something from the top, in this case an attack. Now, you pick two of these cards and you base it on these initiative numbers here, on how soon in the turn order you'd like to go. And then you will choose if you're going to do the top action, or the bottom action, or the generic action, which is shown here. These generic actions are like, attack 2, move 2, something very basic. But you choose just two of your cards out of your hand, and you commit to using those two cards during that turn. So you've programmed your actions during that turn. Mechs versus Minions. There's another programming one. That one's kind of interesting because you draft the cards. So you'll be getting like 5 cards per turn, well 10 in the beginning and then 5 after that. You lay the cards out, and then people take turns choosing the action or the attack card that they want to use and add to their deck to program their mechs. You may choose to do something like a ripsaw, which is going to help you shoot, or you may want a blaze for movement, or a scythe to turn or something. But you kind of choose from your available cards, and you pre-commit those in the initiative spaces depending on what you want to do. Mombasa, it's an economic game. Mombasa is also a programming game. You are choosing what you're going to do. Are you going to explore this turn? Are you going to invest in bananas? Are you going to invest in coffee? And then, you might use your 1 coffee card and your 2 coffee card in the same shot to really get a chance at it. But then you aren't sure what the other players are going to do. Maybe they're going to beat you to it. So programming games aren't just for movement and attacks. They can be for economics, choosing what you're going to invest in, if you're going to go adventuring. Robinson Crusoe, what are you choosing to do? But in my opinion, one of the key aspects of these programming games is the commitment. You have to really plan and think through what you want to do, hopefully several steps in advance. If you're choosing one item and playing that's not really programming. That's just choosing your action. But if you have a selection of items, you've got a handful of cards from a rogue and you're going to pick 2 of them this turn to use, that's more programming. And I think that interaction, that planning, it's very cerebral. It's very interesting. But there are some drawbacks. One of the things that programming games tend to suffer from is analysis paralysis. You'll have people sit there and think out what they want to do and try to say, okay, if he does this and this, I might do that. So I better program these 2 moves and then a turn and a move like Robo Rally. Or the mechanisms on the board in Gloomhaven are the bad guys. We know they're going to attack their closest person, whoever has focus. So if they go to attack him, I could sneak around the back and I could play my special backstab card. That planning can really mess with some people. You can get that analysis paralysis. By the same token, it can turn out very frustrating. Robo Rally is famous for this, right? You'll lay out your moves. You know what you're going to do. You're going to make it. You're going to get that flag and turn and head for the next one and head home. But then somebody runs into you and pushes you on a belt. Oh no, now you're like 3 spaces off. So when you move and turn, you've missed the flag and you get frustrated. Or how about Star Wars? In Star Wars X-Wing, those of you who've played it, have you ever put down a turn, like a 1 in a gradual turn or a 2 in a 90-degree turn, and had it go the wrong direction? Yeah, that's happened to a lot of people, hasn't it? So you really need to think that out. So that can be extremely frustrating for players. Very frustrating. However, when those things go off without a hitch, and the plans come to fruition, and there's this beautifully executed turn that puts you behind the opponent, and you're able to shoot them and destroy their TIE fighter or whatever, that can be extremely satisfying as well. So it's got pros and cons on both sides of the ball, and I think I really like that aspect of programming, movement programming or action programming, is being able to plan these things out. And I think the high of when it goes off correctly outweighs the frustration for me. That being said, I know there are some other people who don't see it that way. I've known some people who, that one frustrating moment when they get pushed off the direction, end up on a treadmill or something and get way off base, there's a rage quit. There's a table flip in their future. So, think about that. But when you're designing your games, when you're going through this, if you want a thinky game, if you want people to commit, they're going to put some time and effort into planning and analyzing. If you give them too many options, you're going to end up in AP hell. People are going to be stuck there analyzing and planning and thinking through all the different options like a chess player. So keep the options reasonable and make sure that they're effective. Give them interesting choices, but get them to commit. And that commitment should probably come with consequences. If things do go wrong, they should probably go pretty wrong. I think that gives a game a good dynamic swing. I wouldn't try to make it too random. If you do all this analyzing and programming and set this master plan up, and one roll of the dice crashes your entire plan and really blows somebody out, that will be a little too frustrating. I'm sure you can find that balance. I really like the way Star Wars does its movement programming. I quite like Gloomhaven's choice, movement or action choice as well. Mechs versus Minions, that's a really slick programming mechanism. So give those a shot. Down below, I've included a list of the top 10 action or movement programming games that are on Board Game Geek. Basically, they have that mechanic and where they rank in the Board Game Geek list. So let me know what you think of action and movement programming, if you've seen it, if you like it. If you want to discuss it, happy to discuss it. Leave some comments below if you want to see a particular subject covered or have a particular question. And I'll see you again in 2 weeks on another Shop Talk. Thanks for watching.